When Randall called me and asked me to come down here, he said, "Could you come down and talk about some OSHA stuff?" Well, if I talk about OSHA stuff, they're going to have to hand out about 100 different toothpicks for you guys. So what I'm doing is we're going to talk about increased compliance through cultural change. What we find is that a lot of times people try to comply with the OSHA standards. It's kind of difficult to do. I don't know if you guys have ever looked at the book, but they're about that thick. So instead, let's talk about cultural change, because then you have employees who are safety minded, and then they're going to bring up the issues. They're going to tell you what the issues are, and then you'll wind up being in compliance. So before we get into all that, a little bit of background about me. Safety and loss control guru for UBIC. Before I did that, I was in construction. I was a bricklayer. So I did fire brick work, I did residential, I did commercial, and I kind of picked up some safety stuff through that. But before I did all that, I did the best thing I ever could have done. I enlisted in the Army. Well, if that'll work. At 17, my dad signed for me to enlist so I could go off to basic training between my junior and senior year. It's a deal called split ops. So, go to basic training, I was given one of those. Who here has had one of those on their face? What was the explanation that you were given on how you were supposed to use it? Mine was, here, private, put it on. Here's how you clear and seal it. Here's how you store it. You will wear this until you're told otherwise. That was it. That was all I was told. And then they showed us why. But that's a CS gas chamber. They showed us the hard way what happens if we don't have our PPE. That was the Army's way of training us. Kind of a bad way of training if you ask me, but it's effective because we learn to depend on our PPE. We learn to depend on how it's going to protect us. Unfortunately, employers do the same thing a lot of times. Here's your safety glasses, put them on, or else. You don't explain to them the consequences of not putting them on. You don't explain the consequences of what happens if they don't have them. So when we train like that, we're just training on compliance. We're not training them that it's the right thing to do. You train them on the right thing to do, and they're more apt to do it. Excuse me. So one of the things that I do a lot with employers, and I talk to a lot of employers about, is their culture and is their cultural change. We'll skip through that. So the first question I ask a lot of people is, what do you make? A lot of times people want to tell me the good that they provide, the service they provide, or how much money they make. If you're making somewhere between the newspaper delivery boy and the CEO of Apple, you're probably doing okay. And while I care from a work comp standpoint what good you provide or what service you provide, it's not necessarily important. You have the what to get out of bed every morning and go to work. You have the choice. You have the choice to get out of bed. You have the choice to go to work. But how do we make choices? How do we make our decisions? We make them based on two factors: the knowledge we have of the situation and the behavior that is allowed in our culture. So the knowledge we have is we have to go to work. We have to make money, right? The behavior is that it's not okay to sit at home and not pay your bills and not make money. So that's how we get up. That's why we go to work. Why can't we make it that easy when it comes to changing the culture of our workforce to a safety-minded culture? So, next question I ask employers is, why do you work? A lot of times they say, well, duh, money. Why do you need money? Pay my bills. Why do you have bills? Well, because I have a family. So, that's our values. That's what we care about. We make these choices, we make these decisions to go to work to provide for our family. So that's the importance to us. The safety aspect of it, that just falls in line later on down the road. We care more about making money for our family. So one of the things that a lot of employers fail to realize is that employees don't make the decision or the choice when they're driving into work that morning. That's it, I've had enough, I'm cutting my pinky finger off. Tired of it. They don't make that conscious decision. What happens is they make a choice based on the knowledge they have of the situation, they need to get something done, and the behavior that's allowed in their cultural. The behavior is get it done no matter what it takes. So they make that decision. The end result is now they're missing a digit. So a lot of employers, when I talk to them, they say, I can't believe he'd do something that stupid. I can't believe he was that dumb. And then I ask, well, did you tell him it was dumb? Did you tell him it was stupid? Did they know that the end result was going to be cutting off their pinky finger? No. They made a decision without knowing the end result. So we as employers and as managers have to change the way that we address things. Rather than just expect that they know, we need to tell them. One of the stories that I give in a lot of my OSHA presentations, this is Hank. Man on him is my father. Before he passed away, he had 3 horses, Hank, Lily, and Rosette. Now, Lily was a very gentle horse. You could shoot a rifle next to her, she'd flick her ear, flick her tail, she might turn around and look towards it. That horse, on the other hand, was very spooky. If you can see in his eyes, they're pretty wild. Why? Because of that thing right there on his head. He was terrified of cowboy hats. He was terrified of rain slickers. He was terrified of umbrellas, plastic bags. You name it, the horse was scared of it. Yeah. So my wife and I would go out there on the weekends and we'd mess with the horses because it was something she enjoyed to do. She enjoyed going out there and messing with Lily. That was her favorite horse. Hank was my dad's horse. That was his baby. He worked with him all the time. We were out there one day messing with him, and Dad says, hey, I taught him how to neck rein. Before we had plow reining horse people, are there any horse people in here? Okay. So plow reining is where you reach down, you grab the rein, you pull their head around, you kick them on the opposite side. That's the direction they go. Neck reining means you just lay the rein over on their neck, and that's the direction they go. It's much easier. So he tells me this, and he says, get on him and give it a shot. He did it for me. I want to see if he'll do it for somebody else. Okay. I jump on his back. Neck reining, he did just fine. He says, now drop the reins and put your hand on his neck and see if he'll do the same thing. Okay. So I did. Remember those plastic bags I just talked about? One of them blew by about 2 seconds after I dropped the reins. He spooked and darted. Now, I did what I thought was right, and I grabbed his mane and squeezed really tight. It's a bad idea. He darted. We started going towards some woods. Well, I wanted to go right so that we would miss the woods. I put my right hand on his neck because that's the way I was thinking. Well, that meant to him go left. We both got our way. He went left, I went right. And so I wound up with a hurt pride, hurt butt, and a hurt back. That was about the extent of my injury. But this all started because it was a lack of communication. I took a safe enough attitude on the horse. I really didn't want to be on the horse, but it was something my wife enjoyed doing. So I was taking care of my value. And it was the behavior in my family culture is when Dad says something, you just do it. Otherwise, you're a sissy. So I did it. In result, I wound up with a hurt pride, hurt butt, and hurt back. Now, had we communicated before that, had I talked to my wife and told her, hey, what do you really expect of me? Do you expect me to mess with these horses with you? Or do you just want me to be out there and hang out? I would have found out that she was fine with me just hanging out. I didn't have to mess with the horses. And I wouldn't have had a parting of ways with Hank. So, too many times employers do the same thing. Employers assume that their employees know what they want of them. Employees assume they know what their employer wants. There's no communication. We don't convey expectations. And so assumptions, there are several different ways to use this phrase, several different ways to word it, but this is the most appropriate for the current audience. Assumptions are the mother of all mistakes. Drill sergeants would word that differently. And so when we assume things and we assume that our employees know what we expect, we're making the mistake because our employees are going to assume something totally different. I've been married to my wife for 5-6 years at the time. We lived together. I thought I knew her pretty well, but I still made the wrong assumption. An employee that's been with you for 15, 20 years could do the same thing and could make the wrong assumption. So, going back to that M40 gas mask, while I was in basic training, shortly after we did the gas chamber, we started running what they called confidence courses. That is the Army's lingo for a big obstacle course. Well, we had a private in our company, Private Williams. He was a special kind of character. Couldn't remember a whole lot, like whether or not to put your hat on or take it off, what shirt went with what uniform. And consistently for several weeks, he was failing at PT, at physical training. Well, one of our confidence courses, we had to run the entire thing with that mask on our face. Anybody who's ever had one of those on can tell you it's very difficult to breathe in one of those masks. So one of his buddies, before he left for basic training, told him, hey, man, if you got to run this confidence course, if you're going to Fort Leonard Wood, take that voice disc out in the front of your mask. Nobody will ever know, and you'll still be able to breathe like you weren't wearing it at all. So that's what he did. We were just running a confidence course. So it's probably about I'm going to say 5-kilometer confidence course. We're going along, and Private Williams was always falling out of runs, always falling out of ruck marches. But this time, he was passing everybody. We're like, oh, who lit the fire under him? He gets to the end. He gets to the finish line. He crosses it. Well, what he didn't know was our drill sergeants had booby-trapped that finish line with a tripwire and 4 canisters of CS gas. He hits the tripwire, and CS gas comes pouring out. He tries to run. Well, our drills knew what he did and knew what he did wrong. They descended on him with the wrath of God and passed their judgment on him for about an hour of physical training. He learned a very valuable lesson that day, not to alter his PPE no matter what. But it all started because he made the choice. He made the choice of the knowledge that he had of the situation. I'm failing at PT. I'm looking bad in front of my peers and in front of my drill sergeants. I need to do something about this. And then the behavior that was allowed in the culture that he came from was do whatever it takes to win. And so again, that's an issue that we have in our workplace as well. I'm a slow employee. I take longer than everybody else, and I really need to pick it up. And my behavior that's allowed in my workplace culture is do whatever it takes to get the job done. So we wind up defeating safety devices. We wind up doing something that's an unsafe act, and then we wind up cutting a pinky off or a hand off or an arm, or we kill somebody. And so it's a behavior that we have to change. When I go visit a lot of employers, we deal somewhat with troubled employers that have had bad histories, had difficulties. There's a handful of statements that I get from these employers that tell me that they're treating just the symptom. They're not treating the actual disease, the disease of their workplace and what they need to do to fix it. First one that I hear when I start asking about claims, he should have known better. He knew better than to stick his arm in that machine. He knew better than this. He knew better than that. Well, the company that I worked for prior to this, we were a heavy industrial fire brick company. So steel mills, refineries, power plants, we would go inside and we would reline the thermal linings on the inside of these things. It's a pretty nasty job, pretty high hazard job. There was a steel mill shut down in Tennessee. It was a hot job. So they turned the furnace off at midnight. It's 2,500 degrees. We show up at 7 o'clock in the morning. It's somewhere around 1,000 degrees. We're not getting in that furnace just yet. So we're doing prep work on the outside. Usually our first 12-hour shift, we wouldn't get into the unit at all, because by the time the end of the first 12-hour shift, it was still 200 to 300 degrees. We had a policy in place. Nobody makes entry until supervisors say okay, or until plant safety says okay. One of the bricklayers that had been working for the company for quite some time, he'd been to this shutdown. He knew it was a hot job, but he also knew it was a push. When we hit the ground on that plant, we were already 2 days behind. They gave us 14 days to do whatever we had to do. If we didn't get the job done in 14 days, they fined us $10,000 a day. And so we had to hurry up and get it done. Well, this bricklayer, he was an older gentleman, decided to take it upon himself to go ahead and jump in there about 3 o'clock in the afternoon to do some prep work inside the furnace. It was only going to take him a couple of minutes. Still 400 or 500 degrees. He jumped down inside there. Nobody told him to get out. One of the laborers happened to see him, and he was struggling to move. They grab him and pull him out. They pulled him out. The foreman walked over. Hey, man, you okay? Yeah, I think so. I just need to cool off. He sets him down next to some material, gives him a thing of Gatorade, puts a fan in front of him, and says, I'll be back to check on you in a little bit. When they came back, he didn't have a pulse. He was dead. So plant safety gets called, first responders get called, OSHA gets called, company does their incident analysis. What we found was employee misconduct, plain and simple. He knew better, or did he? We had a policy in place, you're not allowed to get inside that unit without us telling you first. But he still made the choice based on the two things. The knowledge he had of the situation. It was a fast turnaround. We had to hurry up and get it done. And the behavior that was allowed in our workplace. The behavior was get your job done no matter what, but safety first. Only if it doesn't get in the way of production. So him making that choice required somebody to make a phone call to his wife of 35 years and inform her that her husband wasn't coming home. His tools and his check were going to be sent home. She had to in turn call his children and tell his children that their dad was dead. He got killed in an industrial accident. All this happened. OSHA comes out. They do the inspection. They find employee misconduct. They state, he should have known better. You guys have a policy. Your policy stated this. Yeah, he should have known better. But did we convey our expectations to him? Did we tell him under no certain circumstances was he allowed to get inside of that unit? No. As a matter of fact, most of the safety meetings at this job, our initial safety meeting when everybody showed up, we never even covered that. We just said, we'll tell you when to get in. That was it. We didn't stress that. We didn't explain to them that under no circumstances were they allowed to do that. So it was our fault, but we didn't look at it like that. We looked at it as a freak accident. We assumed it was common sense. He should have known better. But did he? The next one is one that gives me nightmares. No one's been hurt doing it that way before. Fast forward a little bit further. It was a brand new construction job in Mississippi. It was a steel mill, again. On the back side of a big furnace, there was two 20-inch gas mains. They were joined together by a butterfly valve. Pipe fitter was putting this thing together. He was buttoning it up. Now, this was a new construction job, so it was a push. It was a hard dollar bid. So we had to hurry up and get it done so we could make the company more money, right? This guy knew this. Company policy dictated any time you were putting any pipes together, you had to have two spreaders, one top and one bottom. That was company policy. Problem was that he could get away with one. He put one in the bottom, and that way when he dropped that valve in there, that butterfly valve, that top one wasn't in his way. They took about a half hour each to put in. So he saved 30 minutes by skipping a step. But it was a very important step. Because where these two pipes started, there were two springs about this long. 20-inch gas mains about like that. These pipes were spring-loaded. They had some serious pressure behind them. This young man leans in before he goes to finish buttoning it up, and he leans in and he put his hand on the spreader. He knocked the spreader out. Two pipes came together and took his head off. But he'd never been hurt doing it that way before. How many times had he done it this way before? A bunch. He was always praised for his fast work and for doing a good job. And, we'll talk about this in a little bit, but good job. Hey, good job on that. What were we praising? We were praising the whole process. We were praising the end result. But what we didn't know was the steps he was taking to get to that good job. We were praising everything. And so he thought that was okay because I've never been hurt doing it this way before. Well, guess what? Somebody had to make a phone call to his wife. Tell her that he wasn't coming home. He had two little kids. They lost their dad. All because we failed as a company. We failed to explain to him and convey our expectations that we don't care how long it takes, you're going to do it and you're going to do it right. And so another man lost his life. From that point, the company as a whole realized that, hey, we're kind of screwing up here. This isn't a freak accident. It isn't something that is employee misconduct. It's something that we're doing wrong. because we're not telling people what we expect of them. Because you can do something wrong 1,000 times. It just means you're lucky. It only takes that once to get your head cut off. So when I hear people tell me about that, I'm going over loss runs, I'm going over their operation, we've been doing it that way for years. Well, you've been doing it wrong that way for years. Well, yeah, but nobody's ever got hurt like that before. It doesn't matter. The next statement is one that I hear a lot in bigger companies, companies with 50 to 100 employees or more. Management won't do anything until somebody gets hurt. What are you telling your employees when somebody has that mentality? One of your rank and file employees says, you know what, yeah, this is unsafe. It's not a good idea, but they're not going to change it until somebody gets hurt. You're telling them that you don't care about them or their safety until it's going to cost you money. And then it reminds me of the other two, the first two. Nobody's been hurt doing it that way before. That's the attitude that management takes. We've been doing it this way forever. And then, you should have known better. Okay, so management now thinks that he should have known better because nobody's been hurt that way before. So what you're telling your employees is, I don't care. I care about the end result. I care about getting this done. I care about being profitable, but we're not going to squawk about it until it costs me money. So that attitude is something that needs to leave your workplace if you have anybody like that. You need to change that culture. You need to change the knowledge of your workforce and explain to them that, hey, we expect you to do it the safest way possible. Open that line of communication. Because if you don't, management doesn't do anything until somebody gets hurt, guess what? Takes that one big accident. I don't know. I know a few of you in here, but I don't know a whole lot of you. Some of you I know have had that one big accident. You've had that aha moment, and you go, I guess I need to change the way that we do things. And that's where the change starts. Back in June, I went down to Texas for the Safety Engineers Conference. It's a big worldwide conference. There's over 10,000 safety engineers there from all over the world. Different speakers are there, and one of the speakers that I sat through his presentation, his name was Randy Greaves. The guy was a great speaker, great presenter. Somebody asked him at the end of his presentation, well, what's the name of your company? The name of his company was Branta Worldwide. And they said, well, what's Branta stand for? Well, Branta is the first half of the scientific name for the Canadian goose, Branta canadensis. And he goes on to explain that we in our workforce are much like Canadian geese. I kind of took that as an insult because a goose has got a brain about that big. But we have the same mentality. Geese, when they're on the ground, I always thought they were a flock, but he educated me, it's called a gaggle. So the gaggle's on the ground. They're down there doing goose stuff, eating, foraging, laying eggs, God knows what else. And they usually have about 2 or 3 sentries. Those sentries are up and they're looking for hazards. When they see a hazard, they start squawking. The whole gaggle knows that they need to get up and fly away. But the problem is that those sentries don't make the decision of which direction they go and how far. They only alert everybody of the hazard. The lead goose is the one who makes that decision when he has absolutely no idea where that hazard's coming from. So he gets up and flies away, and he could be flying towards the hazard. We don't know. He doesn't know. And it's the same way in our workforce, unfortunately. The guys who are usually doing the squawking don't have the power and don't have the authority to help direct it away from that hazard. They just squawk, and they let the employer or manager know, hey, we got an issue, and we'll get that taken care of. But they have no idea what the underlying factors are. So what I want to stress, especially to you guys in here, is if you have someone that comes to you with a concern like that, involve them in that. They do that job every day. They understand the hazards. They understand what it takes to do that job and do it properly. Because if you're that lead goose that doesn't listen to the sentry and you fly towards the hazard, well, now you're putting everybody at risk. He went on to explain to us that when geese are flying, we all know they fly in a V. But do we know why? I didn't. I thought it was pretty interesting. They fly in a V because that way the lead goose can hear the rest of the flock behind him in that V better, honking. Now, researchers have studied geese for God knows how long. And they've found that those honks are actually honks of encouragement. And when they fly that way, they actually fly 76% further than they do if they fly in pairs. But But those geese are back there just honking, basically saying, good job, way to go, keep up the pace, without giving any actual direction. So that lead goose could quite possibly be flying east instead of north, and they don't know. He just knows that they're telling him good job. So that's the last one that I want to talk about as far as statements that employers give me or that I hear is good job. It's a blanket statement. It's a statement that we give people that we're praising them, but we're just praising the end result. We don't know how they got there. So by saying good job, and I'm not saying that it's a bad thing to tell somebody good job, but be specific about it. If you just say good job, then your employee hears, hey, they really liked what I did there. Huh, they're really going to love this. And they wind up chopping off their hand. So be specific whenever you give praise. Good job on picking up that cord so nobody tripped over it. Good job on shutting that machine down before somebody got hurt. Hey, I saw you do that and do it properly. Good job. Because just saying good job, you don't know what you're praising. So when you're talking to your employees, the one thing that I stress to employers quite a bit is be specific, be clear, and direct. Don't tell them, I need you to get this job done, and that's it. Because by doing that, you're not defining the steps that you expect to be taken. I need you to get this job done. It's kind of a free-for-all there. And the next thing you know, you wind up with several claims, and you're going, I don't know what happened. Well, you didn't explain what your employees was supposed to do. Instead, you just told them, get this job done. You gave them the end result. You didn't give them the process. For God's sake, don't be a goose. Like I said, they got a brain this big. If you're going to praise somebody or you're going to reprimand somebody, be specific about it. Be very specific. You did this wrong or you did this right. Instead of, you're not producing or, hey, good job on producing enough. One of the management styles that I talk to companies about sometimes, it's called a 3E method. It's a very simple, some PhD doctor guy figured this out, but it doesn't take a rocket scientist. Explain. Explain your expectations to your employees. Explain what you expect of them. Explain the steps that you expect them to take, and explain the behavior that is allowed and not allowed in your workplace. Because if you just explain, hey, I need this job done, I need this widget made, well, guess what? They're going to do whatever they want to do to get the job done. Instead, if you explain it to them, you explain the process, and you're very clear and specific about it, now they know what's expected of them. The next one is exhibit. You can't explain your expectations. I expect you to have safety glasses, earplugs, and steel-toed boots on at all times. And then you walk out onto your operating floor in penny loafers, shorts, and your regular eyeglasses. Because what you're telling your employee is, hey, do what I say, not what I do. You're leading by orders. You're not leading by example. If you exhibit that behavior and you tell them, this is what I expect of you and I'm going to do it as well, it's much better received. Your employees actually respect that a lot more. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of the company called Alcoa. They're a big aluminum producer. They have a plant in East Tennessee. Alcoa actually has a program called Brothers Keeper. Brothers Keeper is basically everybody from the newest employee that just got hired to the plant manager has the authority to stop unsafe acts and write another employee up. So one of the newest employees at the mill saw some guy, he didn't even know who he was, saw some guy come walking down through there, didn't have boots on, had dress shoes on, and didn't have his earplugs in. Now, he had just been through this training of Brothers Keeper, and he had just been informed, hey, this is what we expect of you. So he was doing what he thought it was right. But since he was brand new there, he didn't want to go writing somebody up on his second day. So he goes to his direct supervisor and says, that guy right there, he needs to be written up. That guy right there was Mr. Alcoa. He was the owner of the company or the majority shareholder or whatever. But he was Mr. Alcoa. Plant supervisor walked over with the write-up and handed it to him. Said, you don't have your proper PPE on. Yeah. And he took it. Said, you know what? You're right. I should have known better. I should have been following the rules and expectations that we convey to our people. So they exhibited this behavior, and they've beat it into their people's heads so much that it just becomes second nature. There was a reporter that was getting ready to do a story on Alcoa, and he pulls up into the parking lot. It's raining now. Well, he grabs his bag and grabs everything and jumps out of the car and takes off running towards the door. He hears someone yell behind him, "Stop." Okay. He turns around, and a guy comes walking pretty quick across the parking lot with an umbrella. The employee told him, "Hey, there's no need to run across this wet parking lot and take a chance of slipping and falling and getting hurt." We're like, "Oh, okay. Well, thanks for the umbrella. I appreciate it." Gets inside. The employee turns around and walks over to his car and leaves. Had no idea who the employee was until he did the interview. Come to find out, he was just a regular rank-and-file mill employee. But he saw somebody doing something unsafe, and he stopped them because that was the behavior that they were expected to exhibit. And so they have it figured out. They had it right because they built this culture in their employees that is just second nature. That guy didn't know who this reporter was from Adam. He just saw somebody running and knew that they could possibly get hurt, and he stopped them. So by exhibiting that, we impress it into our employees' heads that, hey, this is expected from everybody, no matter who it is, from Mr. Alcoa all the way down to the guy that just started today. The last step is evaluate. You have to evaluate your policies, your programs, your procedures, but also your employees. You have to evaluate their knowledge base. Did I explain enough to you, or do I need to explain more? But in addition to that, you also have to evaluate your policies as far as, well, I have these rules. Do I really need them? If you don't need that policy, get rid of it. Why have a rule that doesn't matter? So when you evaluate these things, it's a constant process. Am I doing enough? And if we are doing enough, great. If we're not, what do we need to change? Is it a training issue? Is it a policy issue? Or are we not exhibiting it enough? One of the big fab shops that I deal with on a regular basis, that we've got them brought around to our way of thinking, but it was because we started at the top. And I hate to use political jargon when people talk about trickle-down economics, but in a safety culture, it's a trickle-down effect. If it comes from the top, everybody else gets it. If it doesn't come from the top and you're the guy that walks out there in your penny loafers and shorts and you expect everybody else to be in long pants and steel-toed boots, guess what? They're going to resent you for that. It's going to cause a cultural issue. It's going to cause a shift. And then you're going to wind up with somebody getting injured because of it. The next step after you start exhibiting your behavior that you expect, you evaluate your behavior, open lines of communication with your employees. Don't walk through and say, "How are you? How's it going?" and not expect a response. Talk to your people. The more you talk to them about what they ate for dinner last night or what their kid's doing this weekend or how their kid is, the more apt they are to open up to you about other issues like safety issues. But if you're the type of employer that when you walk out and your employees scramble, they scatter, they're not going to talk to you about anything. All they're going to do is say, well, he knows what the problem is. But if you walk through and you create conversation, then they're going to be more apt to stop you and say, hey, we have an issue here I want to talk to you about. I need to get it fixed. And then you're going to be aware of it. Management, leadership, ownership of companies, a lot of times they just don't know because they don't do that job every day. They're busy managing. They're busy owning the company. They're busy making other decisions. They're not standing there day after day seeing the inherent hazards of this job. Instead, they're doing other things. So your employees are your best resource to point out the hazards in your workplace. How many of you have a suggestion box? Take it down, please. When I used to travel quite a bit before my wife started traveling with me, I had this brilliant idea. Because I was gone all the time. I'd be gone for a month or two at a time, sometime months on end. I was going to make a suggestion box, and I was going to put it in the garage. And that way, anytime she came up with an idea of what we needed to do or something that she needed, she could put it in the suggestion box. And then that way, when I got home, I could check the suggestion box and be like, okay, well, I need to do this, 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 and this. All right, cool. And then I remembered who I was married to. And I knew that that suggestion box would probably be dismembered and burned, and she'd have a little voodoo doll hanging up in its place with pins sticking in it. So I decided that that was a bad idea. But what I would be telling my wife is, I don't have time to talk to you, and I don't trust your reaction to my response. Because if your employee comes up to you with a suggestion, and you can talk to them about it and explain to them that, hey, this isn't a good idea or this isn't going to work, that's one thing. But if you don't trust your employee's reaction to what you have to say, basically what you're doing is you're telling them, I don't want to talk to you about this. Write it down on a piece of paper and I'll look at it. Well, that doesn't work, and it damages a relationship between your employees. So if you have a suggestion box, take it down. Have an open door policy instead. If you have an issue, if you have a concern, you bring it directly to me and we'll discuss it right then and there. Because I'm sure there's a lot of employees who would love to do exactly what I know my wife would do. They would love to tear that suggestion box apart and burn it. So take it down. Now, not everybody in here knows what that is. It's a respirator. The respiratory standard that OSHA has is about this thick. It's about 40 or 50 pages of very fine print, and it's double columned. There's a lot of information in the respirator standard. You guys are not going to be able to memorize every single word that's in there. You're not going to be able to comply with everything. What you can do is you can change the culture of your workforce to employees who notice, hey, there's a respiratory hazard. There's dust here. We need to do something about this. Well, now you've opened that line of communication with your employees and you've said, hey, if you guys have an issue, come talk to me about this. So your employee comes and talks to you about, hey, there's a respiratory hazard here. Okay, well, let's see what we can do to fix it. Well, now you can do the research and find out what you have to do to put your employees in a respirator. It's a whole lot easier to have that sort of mentality than just focus on OSHA compliance. Big fab shop that I deal with on a regular basis, great guys. When we got them in 2012, shortly after I came to this company, they were a mess. They had been inspected in 2011, late 2011, and they got $240,000 in OSHA citations. Now, when I visited with them, I asked them about their safety policies, procedures, and that sort of thing, and I swear to you, they wheeled in one of those little book carts that you see in the library with all their binders. And I'm like, oh, good God. Yeah, you guys got all the policies and procedures. The problem is they were only focusing on compliance, on making sure that they had their policies in order that OSHA wanted them to have. So when they got that inspection, they're like, we don't understand. We got all this stuff. Well, yeah, you got all this stuff, but your employees, all you're telling them, you're taking Uncle Sam's approach. Do it or else. You haven't changed the culture of your workforce. And so I've worked with them for the last 3 years pretty extensively. They were inspected in November of 2014. Their inspection went extremely well. They only got $11,000 in fines. And the fines were because they were repeat violations for machine guarding, but they cited them on machines that were built in 1945. They didn't have guards back then. And so they've been operating them like this ever since. And they said, what are we supposed to do? And the OSHA inspector says, well, you need to get a guard on there, but you're still getting a citation for it. So they went from $240,000 in fines to $11,000 in fines. And they changed nothing about their policies and procedures. What they changed was the culture in their workforce. They changed the way that they addressed things and how they handled things. Because by doing that, they were able to get everybody on board. Hey, we really do care about you. We really do want you to go home the same way you came in. And so that goes a whole lot further with an OSHA inspector than it does, well, we have every policy known to man. Here it is. Here's our book card. But if your employees aren't following that because you don't have it into their heads that they're supposed to, then you're going to wind up with $240,000 in fines. So when this whole thing started, when Randall called me, well, actually, Summer, our marketing director, she's sitting right there. She's my camera woman. She texted me back in May, and she says, hey, can you talk at this deal for Connell at the end of July? And I'm like, yeah, sure. So I call Randall, and I'm like, hey, what do you want me to talk about? He says, OSHA compliance stuff. That's pretty broad spectrum. So I'm like, okay, I'll talk a little bit about that. So one of the things that I wanted to talk to you guys about in your handouts that you have, OSHA changed the HAZCOM standard in 2012. They didn't tell anybody about it. They just expected you to find out on your own. So if you flip to the one that says GHS or labeling under GHS, This is the new standard in a nutshell. It looks like this. Anybody can find it. So they changed the way that these things were put together. They changed some of the labeling requirements. They also changed some of the pictograms. This is a very handy tool to have. If you guys weren't aware that they changed that and you weren't aware that you needed to get new safety data sheets, read through this piece of paper. If you follow this, you'll be in compliance, and you have until June of next year to do it. So June of 2016, they're going to start actually enforcing the new HAZCOM standard. Your employees were supposed to be trained back in December of 2013. Again, they didn't tell anybody about it, so I run around the state like a chicken with my head cut off giving HAZCOM training to everybody. If you guys need more information, go to OSHA.gov and type in HCS 2012. There are untold links about that. So that'll get you in compliance with the newest OSHA or the most recent big OSHA update. The other change they made was about reporting. Had anybody heard about the new reporting requirements? One person? Well, so am I, but that's besides the point. Okay. Does anybody know what they're supposed to report to OSHA? Start with that. I'm sorry? Well, you're supposed to record those, but actually reporting them, right. That's what it is. Amputations, fatalities. Well, used to, the old rule was one fatality, you had to notify OSHA within 8 hours. And it was the hospitalization of 3 employees or more from one incident. You had to notify OSHA within 24 hours. OSHA realized they were getting some bad information. They were getting some bad data because it's not real common that that happens, that 3 people go to the hospital from one incident. So they dropped it down to 1 employee. So now, if you have 1 employee that's hospitalized, and I'm not talking about treated and released from the ER, actually go up to a room and stay for a little bit, you have to call and notify OSHA within 24 hours. The other thing that they added was an amputation or loss of an eye. So that was the reporting change that they made, and it went into effect January 1 of this year, and nobody knows about it. So if you've had a hospitalization, might want to call OSHA and let them know, hey, we had a hospitalization. We just learned you guys changed the rules. Because if not, and they find out, it's a $3,000 citation for record keeping. Well, if you don't put that out on the nightly news and people don't know about it, how do you expect them to find out? But that's their stance. And so they just put things out there, and it's your job to find out about it. But those are the 2 biggest changes that OSHA made, and so that was my OSHA compliance update that Randall so generously wanted me to do, is HAZCOM 2012, so HCS 2012 is what you need to look up, and the reporting requirements. Just know that if you have 1 hospitalization, you have to turn it in. You have to call OSHA. It's a simple number, 1-800-321-OSHA. Call them, hey, I got a hospitalization. Here's what happened. They're probably not going to send somebody out because the more and more people are finding out about this, they're going to have to open an entire call center to field all these calls. Because people are hospitalized every day at work. And so they're going to get inundated with calls pretty quick. So the date that you guys need to make sure you're aware of is June of 2016. Again, just make sure you're in compliance. So moving on, what I want to leave you guys with, most of all, is safety as a result. We talk about safety, safety, safety. We have a safety program. We have safety meetings. We have safety this, safety that. Safety is a result. It's a result of our actions. Safety is not first. If you put safety first, you literally are putting the cart before the horse. Because you have to make the decision and the choice to do something safely. If I'm not doing something, if I'm standing right here, I'm as safe as I would be in my mother's arms. But I'm not doing anything either. The minute I start to do something is the minute that I put myself at risk. And so that's when I have to start making the conscious choices and decisions to be safe about it. So safety is not a value. It's not a belief, and it's not a topic for discussion. You can talk about safety, and we do it all the time, but I think we do it wrong. Instead of talking about safety, let's talk about what we're doing, what processes we're taking, and what steps we're making sure that we have a safe result. Because that's the important part. We want to make sure that we're able to produce whatever widget we produce profitably and safely and repeatedly. You heard that first one, profitably. That's, any company can tell me that safety's first, and it's not. You have to have production first, because without production, you have no action. So safety is literally second, and that's okay as long as you keep it second. It's a result of our choices and decisions. Again, can't stress this enough. No employee drives to work in the morning and says, I've had enough of this finger, I'm cutting it off. Nobody does that. They make the choice or the decision to do an unsafe act or an unsafe procedure, and that's where they chop their pinky finger off. So make sure that they have the right knowledge. Make sure that you've conveyed the behavior that's accepted in your workplace. By making those two changes, you'll see a big change in your workforce, because you have a much more educated workforce, and they know what's expected of them. So my biggest thing is change your knowledge, change your culture, and you will change the outcome. Statement's always been said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing repeatedly, expecting a different result. Well, if we continue doing the same thing and we're like, why are these people getting hurt? Why are these people getting hurt? Because you're not changing anything. You're just expecting that it's your employees that are screwing up. It might be you. You might not have been able to convey the right information to them. They might have some issues of their own. You need to make sure that you're doing your part to give them the knowledge, to give them the behavior that's acceptable and unacceptable. That's the biggest one. You will not do this, you will not do that, you will not do this. By telling them those things, now they know, hey, I can't defeat that safety device. I can't make this unsafe act. I can't work in this unsafe condition. By doing that and explaining what's unacceptable as well, you're going to change your outcome. The best place for anybody to start, and I hear this a lot, well, we don't know where to start. Again, some of you are our policy holders, and so you have me. If you don't have me, your work comp insurance is a great place to start. They have a safety and loss control guru that does my job. They should be able to come in and help you guys with whatever you need. And if you can't, seek us out. Talk to Randall. Talk to Connell. I'll be more than happy to come out and give you guys a hand, because I really do know better. I've been there. And I can help you change your culture and change the knowledge of your workforce. And when we do that, that's when we eliminate injuries. So thank you guys very much for your time. If you guys have any questions for me, now will be the time to ask. This question was about employer or suppliers and distributors and how they're falling behind. They've actually extended it by 6 months. So you guys, it was December of 2016 or December of 2015. Distributors and suppliers had to start sending out the new updated information. They've extended it 6 months because a lot of these guys are falling behind. And so more than likely, I'm not saying this because I'm not OSHA, but more than likely they're also going to give a 6-month extension to employers to be in full compliance as well. So it was supposed to be December of this year. Everybody was supposed to start shipping the new stuff. It's not going to happen. I understand the problems that you're having with trying to train people on that. The best thing I can tell you is give them incremental training. Hey, this is what we have now. This is what you're supposed to do. And then whenever you get your new stuff in, then train them again. Hey, here's the new stuff. She asked, how do I feel about safety incentive programs? Safety incentive programs are a horrible idea, because then you're just promoting your employees not to report an injury. I'm going to get a $10 gift card at the end of this quarter if I don't have any injuries. But I severed my bicep tendon. I'll just go home and turn it in on my health insurance. And people do that because they become so reliant on whatever that reward is that now all of a sudden, oh, we can't report anything. Or they don't report it until it's too late, and that bicep tendon is retracted all the way to point of origin, and we have to spend tens of thousands of dollars on a surgery. So rather than safety incentive, do a safety compliance incentive. So instead of not having injuries or illnesses, do it on compliance with your policies. Hey, I noticed you have your safety glasses on, and I've not had to reprimand you for not having them on. Here's your $10 gift card. We actually did a little bit of that where it was crew specific. So if an entire crew was found in compliance for that week, they got a safety lunch on Friday. We were a much bigger organization, most of the companies that I worked in, so they were able to do that, but You can take that and scale it down to your size organization and say, okay, well, if you go all this quarter without having me yell at you for not complying with my safety policies, you get a free lunch or you get a $10 gift card or whatever it is. Make it small but meaningful. Then that's how you start to change the culture because, hey, I get rewarded for doing the right thing. And employers a lot of times ask me, well, why do I have to reward people for this? Why do I have to reward them for doing the right thing? Your employees are much like that horse that I just showed you a while back. They have a mind of their own, and as a whole, they outnumber you. They're stronger than you. So rather than try to beat them into submission, make them think it's their idea. Hey, you get rewarded for this if you do it the right way. Horses the same way. Hey, if you come through this gate and go through the trailer, you get a treat. It's the same mentality. They're more apt not to fight you. And if it only costs you a minimal amount of money to incentivize them for doing the right thing, then you're preventing a lot of injuries that could be prevented anyways. So, yeah, safety incentive programs are a terrible idea, and I don't advise them. I say do it on compliance and compliance alone. Sure. So her question was about the OSHA 300 logs. How many of you in here have to fill out a 300 log? How many of you in here and think that you're doing it the right way? A lot less hands. OSHA actually has a flow chart, and it's a very handy flow chart. It's one of the best things that they've come out with in a long time. So if you go to OSHA's website, osha.gov, and you type in 1904, which is the record keeping and reporting requirements, you'll find that flow chart in there. But basically what you need to know is if you have an injury or illness that requires above first aid. Now there's a whole bunch of criteria for what's first aid and what's not, so that's why I say go there. I don't have it memorized. I have a book. I just know where that book is, and so I grab it when people ask me these questions. Anything above first aid, anything requiring prescription medicine, anything requiring days away from work, restricted or transferred, all needs to be logged on your OSHA 300 log. And then people say, well, what do I do with my OSHA 300 log? Well, you're supposed to keep it. Does anybody throw them away? Okay, don't. 5 years. They keep them for 5 years. And they have to be available for all your employees. So anybody can ask, hey, I want to see the 300 summary. You have to show it to them. And you have to have the last 5 years. So make sure that you keep them. And do not, under any circumstances, I've had a couple of people do this, use your loss runs from your workers' compensation insurance to fill out your loss runs. Just because it's compensable doesn't mean it's recordable, and vice versa. Because what happens is then you wind up with a higher TIR, total incident rate, and then you look like a more hazardous employee than you really are because you're not using the right information. So go to OSHA's website, look up that flow chart, and that's what you need to follow. And it will ask questions like, is this a new incident? Yes. Did it occur at work? Yes. Then record it. Is this a new incident? No. Did it happen at work? No. Then don't record it. So it's very easy to follow, and it's something that a lot of people are unaware of that are out there. But print that out when you're filling that out. Use that instead of using your work comp loss runs, and then you wind up filling out, and you got 15 pages of a 300 log when you only needed to log 3 spots. So that's the best resource for that. And what was the other part of your question? I'm sorry. Yeah. After 5 years, you can get rid of them. Some people get that mistaken because some people thought, oh, it's 30 years. Well, we have to keep medical records for 30 years on all of our employees. If you have any type of physicals, any type of medical treatment, that has to be kept for 30 years. Your actual 300 logs, only 5 years, and then you can get rid of those. So once 2010, I guess, after this year, you can throw away 2010s. He asked what happens when you guys get notified that you have to report to OSHA about your 300 log or your injuries or illnesses. And a lot of times they do this for people who are 10 employees or less because if you're 10 employees or less, you don't have to keep that log. You don't have to unless OSHA says that you have to. Or if you're in a certain SIC code. They have certain exemptions that bakers, accountants, stuff that they really don't think is going to be a high hazard industry. You don't have to keep track of it unless they send you a letter. They send you a letter. Do not ignore that letter. We had a guy that he got a letter for, I think, 3 letters in 6 months. He kept throwing them away. Finally, he had a compliance safety and health officer show up at his doorstep. Mr. Smith, we're here to inspect. Okay, why? Well, because you didn't respond to our request for you to fill out a 300 log and send it in. The reason they do that is because they're trying to get information about certain industries, and sometimes they try to look at small employers to see, do we have a higher hazard with small employers in certain industries, so that they can focus on that. Is that a local emphasis program that we need to start? So they'll send you that letter. You can either go online or you fill out the paper form and you mail it in. They just review it and they lump it together with your SIC code. The other reason they do that is because we have these exemptions, and do these exemptions still need to be in place? Or is the baking industry more hazardous than we thought, and we need to go ahead and require them to report? So that's kind of what happens to it. They use it, they lump it all together. As far as your DART rate goes, really your DART rate's not going to mean a whole lot other than that gives you a lagging indicator of where you're at. By lagging indicator, I mean you find out what happens after it happened. Hey, we had X amount of days away from work, restricted or transferred injuries. We're higher than the rest of the people in our industry, or we're lower than the rest of the people in our industry. It's just a comparative thing. It really doesn't hurt you or help you when it comes to OSHA.